Hello, and thank you for tuning in. Before we begin today's session, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. My name is Elisa Zanola, and I'm head of events for the Fashion Scholarship Fund. As many of us are very familiar with Zoom at this point, there are some great features that we'd like for you to utilize. One of them is the comment box. Feel free to send comments to the panelists as she's speaking. And there's also the Q&A box. As questions come to mind, we encourage you to submit them, and we'll answer as many as possible during the Q&A segment of the session. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Marie Coletta, who is the Director of Education Programs with FSF, as well as today's speaker, who is a founder and the CEO of Runway of Dreams, as well as Gamut Management. And we'd like to say a quick thank you very much to SAP's Matt Lukatis, who's a board member of FSF and Runway of Dreams, and without whose introduction, this event would not have been possible. So thank you very much to Matt. And to kick us off, I'm going to share my screen and start with a very brief and wonderful video on Gamut Management's site.
I'm a registered nurse, and I am a strong, independent, empowered woman.
I'm a power lifter. Right now, I'm the strongest in the nation in 120 pounds. I can lift over 300 pounds. I am hardworking and a wonderful person to be around.
When I grow up, I want to be a photographer. And I am sweet, confident, and outgoing. When I grow up, I want to be involved in the NBA. I'm very competitive.
I am a vocational rehabilitation counselor. I'm pretty dope. I'm pretty amazing.
People with disabilities represent the largest minority in the world. According to the CDC, 1 in 4 adults have a disability. My name is Mindy Scheier, founder and CEO of Gamut Management. I am a former fashion designer and mother of a son with muscular dystrophy. In 2014, I founded a nonprofit organization called Runway of Dreams, which celebrates people's differences and highlights the need for mainstream adaptive apparel while showcasing people with disabilities in fashion. As the success of Runway of Dreams grew, I realized that there was a bigger need to represent people with disabilities. And thus, Gamut Management was born. Gamut Management was created to connect people with disabilities to brands and companies, as being inclusive is not an initiative, it's a business opportunity.
We are a part of change. We are a part of changing our pop culture to be inclusive of people with disabilities.
Now I use my prosthetic to advertise and to promote not just myself and what I've been through, but to promote companies. To show people that when you have a handicap, which I like to call uniqueness, it's something that can be shown as an advantage, not a disadvantage. And it's all in how we leverage it.
My next guest is the featured model in a major retail print ad that's getting a lot of attention for its inclusivity. It's inspiring countless kids who rarely see themselves represented. This picture recently went viral. Colton has spina bifida and is wheelchair bound, but he doesn't let that stop him from breaking barriers. So Colton, explain to everyone how the ad ended up going viral.
Oliver went up to the Target ad and he saw it and he was just staring right at it.
Yeah.
And it made his day a lot better.
Yeah, that's so cool. Like, how does that make you feel that you had that kind of impact on someone?
Happy because I can be a role model for him and make him feel like he's not different.
Yeah.
We give our Gamut members a voice by working with businesses and industries in 3 ways: talent management, product development, and targeted marketing, as well as a first of its kind YouTube talk show for people with disabilities called the Gamut Network.
Brands are starting to be more conscious of the disabled community. I just see that there's a change and it's coming, and hopefully everybody would jump on board.
The industry is changing and accepting and realizing that people with disabilities are consumers too.
This couldn't be more perfect or come at a more perfect time.
Please stand with Gamut Management by visiting our website at gamutmanagement.com. Find out how to become a client or how to connect with our community of people with disabilities.
Great, and now Mindy, I welcome you to kick us off.
Thank you so much, and tremendous gratitude to the Fashion Scholarship Fund and SAP for shining a light on this very important conversation. And I am so honored to be the one to be able to have it with the next generation of designers and change makers that are a part of this seminar. So again, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to share my screen and kind of take you all through my journey. Okay, give me a thumbs up that we can all see it. Perfect. So my story begins. I was that little girl that dreamed of being a fashion designer. I never wanted to be anything else. I went to college, studied fashion design, even studied in Italy through FIT, and was very clear on my purpose, that I wanted to be the next Betsy Johnson. I felt I had the hair for it. I felt like I had the personality for it. And I was going to be the next global brand. But as life would have it, I became a mom. I have 3 amazing children, amazing husband, and my middle child, Oliver, there was born with a rare form of muscular dystrophy. And we really didn't know anything about this disease when he came into my life. It was, in my kind of view, it was the Jerry Lewis telethon that we saw every year in September that was for people with disabilities. And now all of a sudden, I had a child that had this disease. And part of the kind of effects of muscular dystrophy are it weakens your muscles and they actually get weaker over time. As you can see, he had to wear a feeding tube for a very long part of his life. And really during that time, this was the commitment that my husband and I made, that we were going to raise Oliver just like our other 2 children, that he was no different. And when we experienced stares or poor you kind of looks on a daily basis, we kind of gave them that look back that we're good. He's awesome. And we are going to be able to navigate this life as best we can. But the interesting thing that started to happen as Oliver got older is that the very thing that I loved more than anything else in the world, and that's getting dressed every day. I mean, even in COVID, I was the one that never kind of stayed in my workout clothes. I dressed to the nines to do my laundry or walk the dog because it was such an important piece to my identity and who I am as a person. And when I saw on a daily basis how that love and pleasure that I had every day was a very painful, aggravating, and sometimes humiliating task for Oliver, as he could not do buttons. He really struggled with zippers. He could not put shoes on his own or tie laces. And what would take his younger brother 30 seconds to do, it would take Oliver so long that generally I would have to run in and do it for him to get us out of the house. So our solve was for him to wear sweatpants when he started school. And generally new parents who are sending their kids to preschool or to kindergarten aren't worrying about how their child is going to go to the bathroom on their own. They're worrying about, are they going to make friends or are they going to like the teacher? But in our case, that was our primary focus on how was Oliver going to be able to manage his clothing and be able to toilet on his own. So our solution was that he was going to wear sweatpants every day, because that way we knew he'd be able to manage it on his own. He'd be able to fit them over his leg braces, and it was our solve. Done. Until one day, Oliver came home and said, "Mom, I really want to wear jeans. Everybody else gets to wear jeans except for me. And I don't really understand why I haven't been able to wear them. I have to wear the same thing every single day." And the truth of the matter is, not only did I have a kick in the gut moment as a mother, but I also had a kick in the gut moment as a fashion designer, somebody that dedicated my entire career to this industry. And I needed my 8-year-old to remind me of how powerful, how important clothing is to your self-esteem and your confidence. And it was really at that moment that I had a choice. I could look at my beautiful little 8-year-old son's face and say, I'm so sorry, but it's not in the cards for you to be able to wear jeans. It's too difficult. You're not gonna be able to do the buttons. It'll be hard for your leg braces. Or I could look at that little face and say, you bet, you're absolutely going to go into school tomorrow wearing jeans. So there, my friends, begins my journey. And that was taking a pair of jeans that he had and figuring out at 2 o'clock in the morning, when I had already cried myself to sleep because I completely missed this, that I made a mistake and I needed to figure it out. So most of the people probably looking at this have no idea what this kind of button trick is. But if there's anybody in this session that has been a mother and has been pregnant, this is the real fun little trick that we do to wear our jeans longer when our stomach expands and we're not ready to go into maternity. So I quickly kind of tuned in to this solve and said, you know what? That will make it easier for Oliver to pull them up and down. And I'm going to remove that zipper and I'm going to kind of cut up the side seams of the bottom of his pants and utilize something called peel and stick Velcro to be able to go around his leg braces so that I'm not shoving the jeans on top of them. And those modifications were enough for the next morning, Oliver to be able, for the first time in his life, independently dress himself with anything that had zippers or buttons in it. And it was the very first time he ever wore anything to school that wasn't sweatpants. And when I tell you the immediate transformation that came over him from a pair of jeans was not only transformative to me, it was transformative to Oliver as he held his head up a little higher that day. He went into school with a certain swagger that I've never seen from him before. And what occurred to me was that if Oliver at 8 years old was transformed from a pair of jeans because he finally got to wear what he wanted to wear, how in the world did the 1 billion people on our planet, how did they manage clothing challenges? And this really was my aha moment that I needed to take my background of being a fashion designer and have a small goal of changing the fashion industry to be inclusive of people with disabilities. But I knew that I had a lot to learn before then. And this is something that I cannot underscore enough to, especially all of you students out there, that when you are diving into something new, you better really know what you're talking about. And the greatest way to do that is to immerse yourself, is to do research, is to know every single thing about either the market that you're going into, the products that you want to develop, etc. So I only knew my world with Oliver. And just as a reminder, I was only 8 years in. I didn't know very much about muscular dystrophy, let alone the enormous amount of disabilities out there. So I decided, this was back in 2013, that I was going to really go full in on this. And I did research for an entire year. I went to schools, I went to hospitals, I spoke to anybody that could possibly answer any questions that I had about clothing challenges. I needed to also understand what was the difference between somebody that had cerebral palsy and somebody that had muscular dystrophy, or somebody that had dwarfism versus somebody that had Down syndrome. Were there commonalities between vastly different disabilities and clothing challenges, or was I wrong? And the only way that I was going to be able to do this was to really, really get involved and truly understand what I was kind of talking about. So that year, thankfully, came to a culmination that there were commonalities between vastly different disabilities and clothing challenges. And they really resided in 3 categories. The first one were closures. So buttons, snaps, zippers, hook and eyes were almost 100% across the board a challenge for both physical and cognitive disabilities. So whether that was the physicality of buttoning the button or the cognitive notion that you have to put a buttonhole through a button to make it close. Now, I always like in this part to throw out a really interesting little fun fact that unfortunately I can't ask the audience to answer, but so I will go right into it. But I would have asked, do you know when the button and the buttonhole was developed? Anyone? No? Okay, well, the button and the buttonhole was developed in the 13th century. The 13th century. And the fact that we are still using that technology in 2021 is almost mind-blowing. So when we think about, okay, let's find a better way to close a garment, but make it still look like the product that everybody else is wearing. Here is one of the first pieces that I worked on, and that is putting something that we have all know and love in our life, and it's called a magnet, behind the button so that it easily opens and closes on its own to make it easier for people with disabilities to be able to put on and take off their clothing, but also for the part of the population that is never going to be able to dress themselves and have to be dressed 100% of the time. This makes it easier for their caregivers. And we could actually be giving people time back into their lives. So really rethinking the way product is put on and off the body while maintaining the same look of the product was really category number 1. Category number 2 was the adjustability of the product. So finding ways to have a product fit different shaped bodies was something that was very clear in the focus groups and the surveys, that people with disabilities were spending as much on their tailoring, if not more, than what the item cost to purchase it. So actually, what we discovered through that phase is that on an average, the population of people with disabilities was actually spending more money per garment than an able-bodied person was. And that was really an interesting data point that I hyper-focused on, because if we could take that, the element out of the tailoring, or even at least make it a little less expensive, that was definitely helping on the cost per item that this population was spending money on. So how did we do it? Again, these are all things that are in existence, but generally not necessarily thought of as a solve for this population. The first one is adjustable waistbands. In kids' product, that is almost always in a waistband, that it can be adjusted so that the kids can grow a little bit more easier with the product. But why are we stopping it with kids? It should go all the way up to adults, because in many cases, in the population of people with disabilities, you know, they're, even during the day, their waists can grow, can decrease just from the side effect of their disease or what happens when they eat, etc. And or maybe they could wear the product longer in their life. and we could be saving money that way. Ruching, or utilizing elastic to adhere something better to the body. Now, ruching in general is a design element or something that just adds a little flair to the garment, when in reality, it could help really have the item fit the limb much better than without it. So in many cases, leggings, for example, do not fit somebody with a disability very well because their legs are abnormally skinny. And having that kind of design feature allows it to really kind of, again, adhere to the leg, and or if there is a difference in length, whether it's the arms or the legs, that can really help the product move up and down in the necessary length of the leg or arm. And the last is just elastic. It is just such an easy go-to that can, again, help with moving product up and down the body. Again, I am, a perfect example of what I needed for Oliver, that he did need that extra support to be more easily able to pull the product up and down rather than using a button and a zipper. And the last category, again, is rethinking the way that the product goes on and off the body. Just because a t-shirt has been designed that it has to go your head through the neck hole, arms through armholes, doesn't mean that's always how it has to be done. And this is something, again, I'm going to have little nuggets that, especially for this audience, that these are things that your generation and generations to come can rethink. Why does it have to continue to be that way? Who says a t-shirt has to go on like that? For somebody that has to be dressed 100% of the time, having the product open up in the back and you go in arms first, rather than struggling to put something over the head and navigating arms through the armholes, literally puts time back into the lives of people that need it. And it makes the dressing and undressing process so much easier. So once I kind of got to that part, that I was able to now say, okay, I am going to focus on these 3 categories and see if we can implement them into mainstream clothing and really have the industry understand that this isn't recreating the wheel. This is actually finding ways to modify the wheel so that not only are we including people with disabilities, but we are actually expanding the customer base of who can wear the product. I'll go back to this great shirt right here. So if you remember, I have 3 children, Oliver being my middle. If you don't think my youngest son doesn't only want to wear magnetic clothing tops, you're wrong, because he said to me immediately, if I never have to do a button again, sign me up. So yes, this has the population of people with disabilities in the mindset of make it easier to wear mainstream clothing, but think about how far we can expand. So from that point, that's when I really started saying, all right, I'm ready to now go to the industry. I developed prototypes. I did so many focus groups to be able to kind of check it off with the population and make sure that I was spot on with what I was proposing to make it easier and then go into the industry. And so that was when I used every last contact of anybody that I had in the fashion industry and said, give me 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes to just kind of introduce you to the next frontier of fashion and the 1 billion people on our planet that have not been serviced by the fashion industry. Fortunately, I got myself in front of the team at Tommy Hilfiger. This is now back in 2015. And what I decided to do was I bought every piece of the collection. I actually bought 2 of them. One part I kept as is, and the other I modified with the modifications that we learned from that year's worth of research and development, so that I could show the team that not only do these modifications help an enormous amount of people, but if I could do it, they certainly could do it and do it better. And now we would be increasing the amount of consumers that would shop the Tommy Hilfiger portfolio. And I am very excited to say that in 2016, we made fashion history and launched with Tommy to create Tommy Adaptive, that started out as a kids collection and now has grown to both kids and adults. And it is solidly part of their portfolio in that they are taking their product and they just have adaptive versions of the product that they sell on their site. And it has been game changing, not only in the customer feedback that they're hearing, the amount of new customers that they're bringing in, but also to the fact that they have been pioneers for the industry. Because since 2016, we now see Zappos has Zappos Adaptive, Target has an adaptive line, Kohl's has Kohl's Adaptive, Nike is in the game. In 2 weeks, we will be announcing a major retailer that will be presenting their adaptive collection actually on our runways in September. That in a short amount of time, the fact that I can name 5, 6 mainstream brands that are dedicating resources, funding, employees to the fact that adaptive is absolutely going to be the next category in the fashion industry is so exciting and truly beyond my wildest dreams. But the important thing is that I do want to kind of highlight before we move on from Runway of Dreams is that it actually became much more than just about the product for the foundation piece of it. It was really being able to raise funds to have not only awareness campaigns, and the way that we do that is through our big runway shows. As I mentioned, our next one is during Fashion Week, September 9th, with a global premiere September 12th that you all can tune into on our YouTube channel. But it really puts people with disabilities on the biggest stage in the world of New York Fashion Week to say that here they are, welcome to the consumers that have not been considered up until now. And also on our runway this year, the fact that Kohl's is our presenting sponsor. We have Tommy Adaptive, Zappos Adaptive, Stride Right, and the brands that I can't mention yet, but Target also is really, really exciting that we have all these brands coming together to say, we're going to shake up the industry and we're going to do this together. And we are going to put over 50 models with all different types of disabilities on the runway to finally put them in the spotlight. So we have our awareness campaigns. We do a scholarship opportunity for students that are focusing on adaptive design and or students with disabilities that want to get into the fashion industry. We have college club programs on over 17 campuses across the country, and more are emerging every year. We also do a grant program, which is very near and dear to my heart, that we grant money to either small organizations or individual families to be able to buy new adaptive clothing, because there's always going to be the part of the population that will not be able to afford new adaptive clothing, and we want everybody to be able to take advantage of it. So during the time of creating Runway of Dreams, suddenly other brands and other industries even started reaching out to Runway of Dreams to be connected to people with disabilities, whether that was Delta Airlines reached out to us and said, well, we want to be the official airline of people with disabilities. We want them in our in-flight videos. We want them in our commercials. We want to understand what it takes to be the official airline of people with disabilities. Okay, and we filled their need. Procter & Gamble reached out to us and said, well, we're developing a new product for people with disabilities that we need help filling a focus group with all different types of disabilities. We don't just want one. We want as many as we possibly can. No problem. We help them do it. And these asks kept coming over and over again. And suddenly, in about 2018, I realized if they're reaching out to a nonprofit that really doesn't do this, then that must mean that there's another opportunity to get involved in. And Gamut Management was born. And it was born to be a talent management company that exclusively represents people with disabilities. It's all that we do. And it was really important to get the fact that this is, as I mentioned before, new revenue streams for companies, new marketing opportunities, and new faces in pop culture. And in the process of developing Gamut Management, these numbers are very hard to argue with. $1 trillion of spending power that this population has. 1.3 billion people globally, which is 17% of our population. And really understanding that, again, including people with disabilities is not only the right thing to do, but actually, it's on the next slide, my favorite kind of quote of the whole deck, that inclusion is not an initiative, it's a business opportunity. And really understanding the key to unlocking the audience for a company is including people with disabilities. And it's something that sounds so simple, but and in a way it actually is. And the way that we do it is really understanding that people with disabilities should be included in every step of the value chain in a business, starting from exactly how we did: research, focus groups, surveys, all the way up to developing the product, testing the product. A key part of what I believe in, we're testing the product, because just trying on a product for 5-10 minutes doesn't really inform how the product wears. And for this population, that is such a key part of the development of it. So Gamut really focuses on kind of these different categories of business development, marketing. We are actually in the process of launching a Gamut seal of approval, very similar to the Good Housekeeping seal of approval. Research and thought leadership, talent management, and of course, entertainment industry council, so that when we do have roles out there that are specific for people with disabilities, we actually have that disability to inform, to make sure that it is authentic. As you can see on the next slide, I mean, we are really on the forefront of exciting times in our world, that major brands are understanding the importance and the power of people with disabilities in all different types of industries, from Microsoft to fashion to consumer products, etc. And just being a part of this in the forefront through both Gamut Management and Runway Dreams has been just truly incredible. Oh, wait, I can't miss the best picture of all. Here we are with Oliver Scheier, who is now almost 17 years old, which I cannot believe. And as you can see, he is living his best life with the swagger and his whole jam. And really, we are creating, and you all certainly will be creating, a world that people with disabilities are just people. And that our world, we are changing from having to have this population navigate a world that wasn't created for them, to now being a part of a world that is created for them, that does include them. And from the minute they wake up to the minute they go to bed, there are products and services that have them in mind, that welcome them into our mainstream world. There's a little bio, Mindy Scheier, but I think we covered most of that. And that, let's see how we did on time. Oh yes, we're very good. I am, again, so incredibly honored to be a part of this. I'm so excited to hopefully inspire any and everybody kind of listening to this seminar, because this is the future of fashion and our world, and you all are the future of fashion. And any product related or service related industries, you are going to make that happen. So this is now my favorite part of the presentation, and that's Q&A. So please don't be shy, ask any and all questions. It's what I'm here for.
Great. And Mindy, we did have a good amount of questions come in already. Attendees, feel free to submit yours now. The first question is from a scholar applicant, and he has asked, as a designer, what steps should I take to be sure my designs are inclusive of people with disabilities?
Great question. And this is something that even on a individual designer up until the big mainstream brands is the same process that I would, that I very strongly suggest. And that is really getting the population involved. So certainly you can reach out to Gamut Management and we can help connect you to somebody in your area or a couple people that have disabilities so they can really test the product, weigh in on the product, and really help inform if your product is wearable for the population and really get you a good cross-section of different disabilities and really try to find ways that your product could be worn by as many people as possible. But on that note, I do want to also mention that I say as many people as possible, because unless the product is custom, it would be very, very difficult to be able to say that this product will fit everybody. The reality is, and certainly if we have designers on this call, which I know we do, a size 2 at the Gap is very different than the size 2 at Gucci. And that is what our world is very used to, that, you know, we try to do our best to fit as many different people as possible, but that it would be absolutely my recommendation is get this population involved.
Thank you. That's great advice, Mindy. Now we've had Alexandra, who's in the audience. She thanks you for speaking to them today and has asked, how do the magnets work when it comes to machine washing? Clothes are easier to put on for a disabled audience. Have you also made them easier to care for, like with special hangers, easily washable material, etc.?
Excellent question. So the magnets that are generally used in apparel are specific for apparel use. So they are enclosed in a kind of a plastic coating that is meant for washing and drying up to certainly a certain level of heat. There is kind of the mastermind of magnets is a woman named Maura Horton, who really developed kind of the original magnets for apparel and the line Magna Ready. But really that has now grown to being very much a part of adaptive apparel, certainly for the adult lines. For the kids, it will really depend on the age level because they won't put magnets in clothing under a certain age, but they are really very, very specific for apparel.
Great, thank you. And in a similar vein, this scholar applicant has asked, what resources do you recommend us utilizing for us to stay informed on the adaptive category?
Well, the wonderful part of this category is there is now so much being written about it. Coresight, for example, which is a very big research company in very much in the fashion space, has done many reporting, has done a lot of reporting on adaptive. Even if you kind of Google, Vogue did a big article on the spending power, the kind of ins and outs of adaptive. You will find so much research that is really housed in the world of Google. And certainly you can always reach out to us directly at Gamut or I would say Gamut's probably better to help keep you informed and be able to help navigate and guide you.
Great, thank you so much, Mindy. I think we're going to know the answer to this one, but this scholar applicant has asked, do you feel like this category is getting more attention and growing and expanding? What you just mentioned, it seems like it might be, which is very, very exciting.
Absolutely. Again, the fact that there are 6 to 7 mainstream brands in this category since 2016 is such an unbelievable statistic. And generally the industry doesn't move that fast or get involved on a fairly decent cadence. I mean, the reality is it took almost 20 years for plus size to get to the place that they are today. in that so many brands, and it's just, part of the category or the umbrella that brands have plus size offerings. And I think that adaptive will be a category just like that. And I think it's going to happen much faster.
That is inspiring news. Another question, and you mentioned a few brands earlier on, but this scholar applicant has asked, which brands and companies today are developing adaptive clothing? Who do you think is really winning in this field?
The pioneer of it, truly, with us is Tommy Hilfiger. They really did a tremendous job of launching this space, and in a way that was encouraging of other brands to get involved, which again is also not typical of the fashion industry, that they really went out there and publicly helped us say, the more brands that get involved in the space, the more consumers that are going to have their needs met. So Tommy, definitely was the pioneer. We have Zappos, created the Zappos adaptive platform. Target has Cat and Jack adaptive, and is in the process of launching, and they also will be launching on Runway, some other categories in the adult sector. We have Kohl's that have quite a few of their children's wear brands that have adaptive offerings. Nike has the Fly Ease sneaker, which has really been game changing for the population, especially in the footwear divisions. We definitely have worlds to go in that, because footwear is so critically important. I hope we have some footwear designers out there, because that is something that is really, really important in this space. Stride Right also has made great strides in their kids lines, but again, come the next 2 weeks, there will be another big player that we will be announcing. So I think it's just extraordinary how many big, huge brands are in this space, not to mention the smaller companies that are doing such an unbelievable job. Billy Footwear, IZ Adaptive, Able Jeans. So honestly, if you do some solid searching on adaptive, what you will find today versus what I found in 2014 is game changing.
Thank you for that, Mindy. Another question is, what are your goals for the adaptive category? What do you want to see in the future?
My goals, and I feel really confident that we are going to meet them even faster than I expected, is that adaptive will just be another category in the industry. No different than adaptive, no different than plus size, no different than maternity or petite, and in some cases even pet clothing. This is going to be the largest and most successful category outside of able-bodied or typical mainstream. This will be the most exciting and newest category that will come to the industry. And I think that your generation, the college students of today, are really the ones that are going to be able to really kind of see this all develop and be able to say, I remember when this was not an option, and now it is just completely mainstreamed. This is just a different fit for a population that needs these modifications. And again, just as a reminder, just because it was developed for ease of dressing for people with disabilities does not mean that the rest of the world can't wear it. Again, my youngest son is magnets or nothing in his world. So this is, and again, kind of going off on a little tangent, but the other thing I'd love to really express, aside of, thinking about the category, is I kind of put this ask out to all of you, and certainly any engineers out there or anyone in kind of that realm, is let's think about the technology. Technology equals adaptive. I mean, that is the fact, and this is something that we are so deep and excited about in our work with SAP, is really understanding how important technology is to making a difference in the lives of people with with disabilities, not just the product, but finding the product, searching the product, even in a store, navigating how to get to the product. So this is actually so much bigger than the apparel and footwear and accessories industry. It's everything else that comes with that in the world of fashion and other industries. And again, whether you're a designer or an engineer or you're into marketing, etc., I want you all to think about how you can make a difference to make this easier for people with disabilities to have the same experience that we all have.
That is an inspiring call to action. So thank you for that, Mindy. And now I think we have time for one more question, and it would just be advice that you can share with these students and our past scholarship winners. As the founder of Runway of Dreams and Gamut Management, what advice do you have to leave them with as they're starting their careers and wanting to be as successful as you one day?
I have two, if you don't mind. The first one is, and this is something so important that I learned that I would love to pass on to all of you, that failure actually can be digested as feedback. That if something is not working, it is not necessarily a failure. It just means you have to take that feedback and rethink how you meet your goals. And the best example I can say to that is when I first launched Runway of Dreams, it was very much a for-profit. I didn't know anything about the nonprofit world. I came from the fashion industry. I had started 2 businesses of my own previous to this, and I had no idea anything about this. But when I first went to the industry, I was constantly getting the feedback that, good for you, what a great idea, let us know how it goes. But if no other mainstream brands have ever done this, then that must mean there's a reason, and we're not willing to take a financial risk on this. We can't. It's not that we're not willing to, we just can't. So when you hear this type of communication over and over again, I had a choice, right? I could say, damn it, I was wrong. Oh, sorry. Shoot, I was wrong. And, this is not something that's going to happen. Or I can say, all right, this is really important feedback that I am getting, that I need to find another way to reveal this market. And if it's constantly the monetary aspect that I'm hearing is my roadblock, then I need to find another way to circumvent that and have this population reveal themselves. So the only way that I could think about doing that is to become a nonprofit. Because if I was a nonprofit and I was really wrong, any brands that got involved in this mission with me, at the very least would get a tax write-off or a donation or feel very good about what they did, because I knew that it would reveal itself as a business opportunity. I just knew it. And thankfully I was right. But kind of my moral to that story is, if I had taken all those comments as a failure, that I was wrong, I wouldn't be where I am today. So just focus on your goal. And if you're not getting there by the path that you originally thought was your path, take a step back and rethink it. There's always another path. And the second piece is, just because things have been done a certain way doesn't mean it has to always be that way. Just because no mainstream brands had ever done it, haven't considered people with disabilities, doesn't mean they shouldn't. And or just because shirts have classically had buttons and buttonholes in them doesn't mean that's how we have to do it in the future. So rethink it. Really, really dispel what has always been doesn't mean that's how it has to be. You guys are the change makers, so I can't wait to see what you guys do next.
Well, thank you so very much, Mindy. This has been an informative and inspiring session, so thank you so much for that. Attendees, we encourage you to tune in next week for a FSF's hard look at marketing analytics. So if you're interested in participating in the marketing analytics discipline, we encourage you to tune in at 6 p.m. And Mindy, Marie, thank you both so much for tonight's fantastic event, and have a great week, everyone.
Thank you.